Hi, I'm Vip Palmer. I'm the Global Head of Data Management at WPP. We've got 130,000 colleagues across 152 countries, across 500 plus operating companies. My role is really around ensuring that we harmonize the way in which we use data across our very complex enterprise of organizations that we have across WPP. In our quest to find the perfect data catalog or a solution that answers to, the challenges that we're having in and around, finding, curating and inventorying our data. And in the world of data catalogs, everything's a little bit the same, right? When I was looking at, data catalog solutions, Data.World really shone out because it was different to all the others. Right. Whenever I've worked with other data catalog providers or seen other data catalog solutions, there's always sometimes a bit of a bias to certain platforms or to certain technologies or to certain applications. Data.World was the only one I've ever seen where it's really agnostic, right? It doesn't care if you're working with an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet. It doesn't matter if you're using Python or R or SQL or Sparkle. It gives you an array of integration capabilities, and it doesn't try to pin you down into certain ways of working or into certain technologies. And then the other thing that really shone out is the knowledge graph, right? It's the only data catalog that I've come across that's underpinned by a knowledge graph. And that opens up so many realms of capabilities, everything from the data virtualization capability, right? The ability to be able to connect to and multiple data points and run federated queries across data as if they were in one place. In terms of the rollout and the implementation, this is where the rubber really hits the road. And this is often where things can become quite difficult. But the experience with Data.World was worlds apart from what I've experienced before. We've got our own appointed engagement and success team, right, that we work with. We talk to them on a weekly basis. We give them our goals and our objectives. This is what we're trying to do. And they work with us to ensure that, we're not trying to bite off more than we can chew, and we're taking the right steps to get us to the North Star that we're trying to get to. And I always use the analogy of like a jigsaw puzzle, right? And Data.World is one of those pieces, and as we look across our technology estates, we've got loads of these pieces of the puzzle, right? But they all have an interconnecting piece into Data.World. And I think that's where it becomes really powerful and unique.
Hey there, I'm Brent Dunham, Partnerships Associate here at Data.World. I'm very excited about our next panel because we'll get down to brass tacks on DataOps with experts from SAIC, Enterprise Knowledge, and DataOps Live who implement it every single day. Don't forget to follow along and chat with us today, your fellow summit attendees, Data.World speakers in the Slack community by clicking on the menu icon below the video player. All right, let's dive in and talk about how to apply tenets of DataOps to become a more data-driven organization.
And we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DataOps Implementer panel here at the Data.World Summit. I'm joined by three experts with a variety of viewpoints and backgrounds to discuss some of the best practices around technology, process, approach, culture, as well as some of the potential pitfalls when it comes to the tenets of DataOps and what it means to really become a data-driven organization. My panelists today are Justin Magruder, who's the Chief Data Officer from Science Application International Corporation, or SAIC. SAIC is a Fortune 500 information technology integrator based in Reston, Virginia. Justin leads implementation of the company's enterprise data strategy, including data governance, advanced analytics, and things like that. Prior to SAC, Justin has a long and storied career in and around data, including financial information architecture, market data technology strategies, and all similar things. So Justin brings a strong public sector background we feel is important, especially with all the advances in legislation and regulation. So welcome, Justin.
Thanks, Patrick.
Guy Adams is the Chief Technology Officer of DataOps, a self-described proud hands-on geek. Guy is a multi-award-winning technology leader, architect, and lecturer. Guy is the co-author of the 2020 DataOps philosophy you can find at truedataops.org. as well as DataOps for Dummies. So as a technical implementer, thought leader, and private sector consultant, we really felt that Guy was uniquely positioned to help bring together sort of the strategic and the tactical aspects of the DataOps discussion. So welcome, Guy.
Thanks, Patrick. Great to be here.
Bess Schrader is a senior knowledge management consultant from Enterprise Knowledge. Bess specializes in semantic technologies and integrations. She's also particularly interested in using taxonomies, ontologies, and knowledge graphs in particular to build semantic solutions that help organizations solve complex information challenges. With knowledge graph being such an integral part of data ops and related concepts like data fabric or data mesh, we really felt like it was an important viewpoint that we didn't want you folks to miss. So welcome, Bess.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
So I'd like to start at the beginning, if we could. So data ops was sort of a term that was first coined by Lenny Liebman back in 2014. So it's been around for a while. It was popularized by folks like Andy Palmer, Steph Locke, and finally landed in the mainstream with increased usage, searches, publications, and analyst coverage in 2017, 2018. And here we are 3 years after that, still talking about the concept, but in sometimes very different ways from its origin. So I would love to know, what has the data ops evolution looked like for you, whether explicitly by name or sort of implicitly by nature in your organization. And we can get answers. We'll go in order of Justin, Guy, and Bess. But if you have cross-pollination and you want to respond to each other, please do. So Justin.
Sure. Thanks, Patrick. This is a big topic. Data ops to me are everything. They're business. I worked with a large global financial firm a few years ago, and some of the leaders in the business, when I started working there as an acting CDO, told me that this was a technology company. And I listened and I said, oh, that's true. You use a lot of technology to move your data. And it turns out after a few months, we were able to agree that it was really a data company. Their products are data. Their customers consume their data, use their data to make decisions, and they get measured. Their performance and their capabilities are measured using data. And it took a while, but we eventually moved the needle there. And I think data ops has been a thread through my career. When I began with another large financial a long time ago, I joined the bank thinking I was going to be some investment banker. But I joined in IT and got thrown into a data project called reference data. And it was reference data services, actually. And I didn't really know what that meant at the time. But after a couple of years, I realized that we were really core to the company's operations because we needed to know who our customers were uniquely. We needed to know what our products were uniquely. We needed to be able to price our products for our customers. And so when we talk about graph technology, we think about triples. You can see this relationship between these concepts, between parties who participate in activities and the things they exchange when they do transactions, and the facts and the dimensions of the products that they're consuming and using. So I think of data ops as absolutely central to the work we do today at SAIC with our customers, and many of them in the federal space and state and local as well, some commercial customers. And it's really all about the data. And that's a mantra that we've repeated here time and again. And I finally have some of my colleagues in the technology space agreeing that it really is all about the data. So that's sort of my tagline, I think, for 2021, post-COVID. I hope it's really all about the data. And speaking of, by the way, we're wrestling, as many of us are, with COVID data and how to decide who's essential and who's been vaccinated and who is opting out, and who can come on premise and who can go to customer sites and what customers can come to our sites. And it's a tough question. And in the end, that question is all about the data. And whether we have authoritative data from the CDC or the pharmacy benefit managers or other companies, or do we rely on people to tell us what they think and what they present as their current status? And it's a fascinating real-time discussion right now that I don't think anyone has really figured out yet. And so I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about it, but it's about the data.
Yeah, definitely an interesting evolution across the industry with the forcing function of COVID. So
absolutely,
yeah, definitely an interesting hit there. So Guy, how about you? What's your evolution look like when it comes to data ops as a particularly opinionated person on the subject?
But I think in many ways, the evolution of data ops is a lot of it's been about working out what it isn't rather than what it is. It still means lots of different things, lots of different people. I think the biggest trend that we saw was, when it first came out, when it hit the Gartner hype cycle, that's kind of a cue for the marketing bandwagon to start. And it's a cue for a lot of people to take what they've been doing for the last 5 or even 10 years, slap a bit of automation on top and call it DataOps because it's on the hype curve and therefore everyone wants to be part of it. I think people are wise to that now. People understand that DataOps is not just everything I've been doing for the last 5 or 10 years with a bit of automation on top. I think the other maturity people have understood is it's not just purely DevOps applied to data. There are some significant differences. So you got two extremes. One that's saying, well, it's mostly what we've always done. One that's saying, well, it's just DevOps. The true DataOps philosophy that you mentioned kind of advocates somewhere in the middle. When we built our philosophy and then product on the basis of that, we said we're going to start with DevOps. Why? Because I've been doing DevOps for 25 years across a variety of organizations. It's battle hardened, it's bulletproof. We know exactly what it's great at. And then we looked at why doesn't that work for data? We're not going to throw the whole thing away. The philosophy is really sound, but there are a few places where data is very different. The way we handle environments, the way we handle state, things like the way we handle testing are all quite different for data. But we started out with DevOps and then worked out how we apply that to data. And I think that's where DataOps is heading. It's an evolution of DevOps. It inherits a lot of the core concepts from DevOps, but it needs to understand the differences with data. But what's been interesting to me is, unlike the DevOps journey I saw, customers get this. The terminology may not be agreed, but 2 years ago, I was talking to customers and none of them had a clue. Today, I might talk to 20 customers in a week. They might all call it something different, but they're all trying to do the same thing. So what the term we use might be changing, but actually what customers are trying to achieve and the ways they're going about it are actually pretty well understood across the majority of certainly the more mature customers these days.
Nice. Yeah, it's that consistency, regardless of what you call it, I think is important because then you don't get the disruptive, start over thing again. So yeah, that's great. And the DevOps world and how to blend that into data is definitely an interesting journey. Everything from your definition of what done means, to some of the other core tenets of how you do things. So, which I think is an interesting, left turn here, take us to Bess. You are sort of boots on the ground, helping people to understand this every day with enterprise knowledge. So what does your evolution look like?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Guy said. We see a lot of companies that are moving towards data ops or, definitely trying to take a more intentional approach to how they manage data. But very few of them are actually calling it data ops. And they're dealing with a lot of these tenets, trying to make sure that you have highly accessible data that users understand, that they trust. You're doing a lot of iterative testing and validation to make sure that you have high quality, usable data. But no one's really saying this is our data ops approach or, this is data ops. We hear a lot of different terms, data engineering, enterprise data management, just lots of different ways of talking about this that all are really kind of getting towards that same trend. And to Justin's point as well, I think we're seeing more and more organizations come to this organically or find this need because it really is all about the data. Organizations now, there's so much information spread across so many different siloed systems that even organizations a few years ago who weren't really thinking about this, we're seeing now everyone's kind of moving in this direction. And obviously enterprise knowledge graphs, which is what I do a lot of work with, have been a big piece of that, trying to unify data and make sure that you're building a really solid semantic layer that gets to kind of making these explicit relationships that people understand and agree upon, as opposed to, columns and multiple relational databases that have strange acronyms that no one understands anymore. Really moving towards this understandable data that's accessible and usable. We've seen a ton of that over the last 3 or 4 years.
Excellent. And let me just add that I love knowledge engineer as a title. I just, the idea that the relationships between your data can be as impactful, if not more impactful, than the individual data assets themselves, I think is an important concept that a lot of people even still haven't reached. So the idea that you're sort of bringing the gospel to the broader public is pretty exciting. So while data ops is interesting as a concept, right? I think the biggest question that most people ask when they start thinking about it, regardless of what they call it, is where's the intersection between data ops and business value, right? Like, what is this going to do to drive our organization forward? So I'd like to focus for a minute on sort of the outcomes and work our way back into the practice a little bit if we have time. But so as we discuss data ops, what are the things that you think we need to keep sort of firmly fixed as the North Star when undertaking a move into this space? You know, whether it's, you know, data ops, data, or something more sort of tool-based, like a data fabric or data mesh, or like whatever it is that you're calling your initiative. What are the things that you can help that will translate sort of between the technical and the business that can act as that North Star?
I'll start. When Patrick, you and I have talked about this quite a bit recently in the context of the transformation we're engineering here at SAIC and with some of our customers. We're trying to get into a more of an open environment, less siloed, more integrated. We're realizing that at the core of that kind of framework, there's some sort of graph of master data. There's some sort of collection of metadata that's perhaps enumerated, but it's real, it's tangible. We can identify the duplicates and the redundancy, and we can address that. And we can begin to define the authoritative sources. And we're calling it the next generation data architecture, which is really the place we are today. It's things that the group of us do, I think, well. We're thinking about it. We're not doing it all the same way, but we're trying to approach these solutions as not as technology solutions, but as business solutions, and we finally, I think, agree that the business owns the data and that IT builds things, but they don't always build the right thing. And so we need to help them understand what the right thing is, because it's really, again, it's all about the data and understanding. I've got some examples that are very typical where we've pulled data out of source systems, the authoritative source, and it's proliferated to parts of the company. And where in these places it goes, we lose the connection to the source, and we wind up with multiple copies of slightly different data. And all of a sudden, it's hard for our ETL jobs to reconcile. It doesn't have all the exceptions handling routines that we need. So as we think about how to fix this problem, I see a big graph. I see a big sort of curated set of information that we're sharing. And I think sharing is another key concept that we haven't done well historically. And I love Microsoft Excel, but it's sort of the bane of my existence. I use it all the time. But I always find it at the root of a lot of the data quality issues we encounter, because somebody's gotten a file from someone else, and maybe it's a different day with different values or whatever the case might be. It's good for analytics, but it's terrible for running on operation and data ops.
Yeah, something Justin just mentioned. It's that data quality piece where I think data ops has a huge role to play, both
Absolutely.
in making sure that your any ETL pipelines you're using or ETL processes or just your data sources kind of validating the way you're ingesting data, the way you're processing it, but also validating the data itself. That's something we found really powerful about knowledge graphs, particularly RDF graphs. There's standards out there like Shackle, the shapes constraint language, that will allow you to see when you have data that doesn't really adhere to your model. And that's been really huge for us in making sure, not only can we make sure that we're processing data appropriately, but that the underlying data actually makes sense and we're not feeding garbage to data consumers and leading to this cycle where they don't trust data, so they're not using data, so they're making poor business decisions or uninformed business decisions. I think that data quality piece is a huge part of what DataOps has to offer as business value.
For me, I think you put this into two buckets that really cover everything that's been mentioned so far. For me, they're governance and agility, and it's what I got for 20 years out of doing DevOps in the software world. I mean, Best mentioned iterative. I remember when I first got into the data world not that many years ago, people would talk about doing a release every 3 months. Well, it's hard to be iterative when each cycle time is measured in 3 months. We want to be measuring cycle times in 3 minutes. And the traditional way of deploying data platforms just doesn't allow for that. If you get a decent data ops process going, I make a change, I deploy it, I see what it looks like. Hey, that's not what my stakeholders want. I'll go back and make a change. For us, we started to know it's really successful when we would have potentially a data engineer and a stakeholder sitting around the same laptop or the same Zoom meeting, make a change, run a complete pipeline. Stakeholder says, hey, that's what I asked for. It's not quite what I wanted, but it's what I asked for. This is what I really want. Now I've seen that. Right, let me make another change and redeploy it. So that iterative process is the only way to get really good outcomes, but it requires a really robust automated process. The other thing is governance. It's easy to get agility. Let everybody just make all the changes they want, and the governance goes in the bin. And it's easy to get great governance. Deploy once a year, have a 400-page manual document. Governance is awesome. Agility is terrible. The challenge is to get both, and these can't be a competing spectrum. The challenge is, how do I get minute by minute agility and iterative deployment, but do it in a way that's still far better governed than anything we had before? Why? Because ultimately, people are going to be making million-dollar business decisions against this data. They've got to be able to trust the quality. They've got to be able to trust the provenance. They've got to have assurance that this data actually meets certain specifications, and they can trust it. So if you do it right, you get this amazing, near real-time agility, and you get incredible governance and change control. That, to me, that's the promise of DataOps, and that's what we're seeing it's really starting to deliver.
That is actually a perfect segue into my one of my next questions that I wanted to ask, which is, when you're balancing those things, the flexibility and the agility, the data quality and the data governance that you've all mentioned, when you're approaching these problems and thinking now, about the business applications of those concepts, I'm sure that a lot of these things, will excite the chief data officers in the room and terrify the CISOs, right? And vice versa, depending on what we're talking about. So what sort of things do you think about when you're walking the line between those two worlds, when you're looking at governance versus agility, or data quality versus data speed, looking at these things, and then specifically when you're having different stakeholders that may have very different goals and may have had a long history of perhaps disagreeing on the best way to go about things based on the incentives that they have in the organization. Like, what is it that you're doing going back and forth between those things?
I'll jump in quickly if you don't mind, Bess and Guy. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think that governance is central to everything. And I didn't think this 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I joined a large financial firm, and governance was a monthly lunch with about 40 or 50 people. And that, to me, that didn't make sense. I think of governance as active, integrated, technical, operational engagement with business and technology users, and it's measuring things, and it's managing requirements and prioritizing requirements for change, and it's measuring quality as it comes out of the machine and into somebody's hands to make decisions. And for us, and the way we've set up governance at SAIC, we've created, I think, a pretty neat process that's based around agile principles, around intake and prioritization, and sort of a series of decisions that have helped our business really begin to use its data better. As we track problems, we know of many systemic and sort of underlying root causes we have to address, and we can build workarounds, or we can smile and nod and deal with it until we can change things. But I think the governance is sort of central to all of this, to measuring quality, to getting change so that we can operate more effectively. That's my 2 cents.
I think, notwithstanding the stakeholders having differing requirements, because that's a fact of life and we'll never get away there. Let's just accept that as a reality and move on. But for the other questions you asked, flexibility versus agility, data quality versus speed, I would challenge the premise of the question. I think saying versus implies it's one or the other. I think if you are experiencing it as one or the other, you probably haven't got good DataOps in place. The point is that I shouldn't have to choose these. These shouldn't be a single spectrum, one end or the other. These should be orthogonal axes. I can have great agility or not. I can have great data governance or not. I can have great data quality or not. But the point is, I don't have to pick any one or two of those. I can genuinely have all 3 or 4 of those, as long as I'm doing things right. So if you find you're asking those questions, should I be flexible and fast versus high quality and governed? You're probably doing something wrong. Is my honest answer to it.
Yeah, I would agree with Guy there. One thing we found particularly effective is building out systems that can note discrepancies or anomalies and showing that information to the user and giving them the information they need to decide whether this data is accurate or high quality or trustworthy. If a data consumer can look and see the lineage of information and see any potential anomalies, that allows us to be flexible and add new data that might not fit our existing models or our existing structures. So we're not limiting users from changing the way they're adding data or working with data, but we're giving them the tools they need to make their own decisions about whether this is data they can trust. And that's something we found really effective.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we are time compressed here. There's a lot of great content still yet to come at the Data.World Summit here. So please feel free to continue watching. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join us at slack.data.world. We'll be able to answer more questions and keep this data ops conversation going. I think it's one that we couldn't cover in many hours, let alone 20 minutes. So we're very excited, though, to see this concept continuing to gain traction and gain speed, especially as it relates to the knowledge graph, which I think everyone here on this call in particular would agree is a very important piece of answering this question moving forward. So once again, thank you, Justin, Guy, and Bess. Always a pleasure. And I look forward to the chat in Slack.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.